Could you tell me a little bit about the research that you and your colleagues did?
So it's funny because one would think that parenting is something that comes in very naturally, and that you have a baby and you'll know exactly what to do and how to raise your child. However, it's not quite that way, right? Parents have tons of questions and it's quite hard to raise a child. And for that reason, many programs have been developed to try to help parents learn about child development and about parenting and what things they can do to promote their children's development. However, there wasn't really a resource for practitioners or professionals who develop these programs to know what is it that parents really want to know about, where they get their information, and how they want to get this information. So our study aimed to address those questions. What is it that parents feel that they need more information about? What sources of information they trust and they go to? How they want to learn about these topics and how they use the information. And so we approached this in two ways. We first conducted a literature review, so we examined what others had done in this area, and we also conducted focus groups with first-time parents of children under the age of 5.
What did your research find from both the focus group and from reviewing the literature that existed?
We found that parents are avid learners. They really want to learn about parenting and children's development. They're constantly looking for information. And there are topics that they know more about than others. They feel more confident in their knowledge about their children's physical development because it has very discrete milestones that they can understand and see and measure. But they feel less confident about their children's socio-emotional development. How much crying is normal? How much whining is normal? And so that is an area that most parents needed more information about, or they felt that they needed more information about and often had difficulty finding information on.
Where were they going to find those sources of information?
Parents use a range of resources, and the internet really emerged as one source that parents go to very often. It's very convenient, so they can access it all the time. They can look for information. They can get support from other parents by joining parenting groups. They can also watch videos of other parents doing things and get ideas on how to implement recommendations at their homes. So they really use the internet quite a bit. They also rely on pediatricians. Pediatricians are the most trusted source of information for parents in terms of physical development. There really is no other source that they trust more, according to our focus groups. And additionally, parents do value experience, and for that reason they turn to family members and other parents quite often for advice on how to address this situation that I'm having with my child, or how have you experienced this or that. So even though there are multiple sources that parents use, I'd say that those were the most commonly used among parents.
When you're talking about the internet, and there's a wealth of information out there, but does that also come with some inherent concerns or dangers from what you found?
Absolutely, and parents mentioned this quite often, that they felt overwhelmed by the amount of information that's out there. It's just too much. They're getting information not only from the internet, but from their parents, their in-laws, people on the street, their doctors, the hospital. So there's just a lot of information out there, and the internet definitely contributes to that because you can find absolutely anything there. So that is one of the limitations of the internet. There's just too much, and the quality is sometimes great, sometimes not so much, and parents have a hard time figuring out what sources on the internet to trust and which ones not to trust. In addition, sometimes the internet can foster competition among parents because you see how, this other person's child is already doing this and mine is not doing that. So it can also cause, it can be a source of tension for parents and concern, because they will compare their kids to other kids.
You had also mentioned the pediatrician's office as being a great source. But what are some of the limitations of getting the information that parents are looking for from the pediatrician?
Well, the limitations are that pediatricians don't have all the time in the world to spend with parents. Parents ideally would get all the information from pediatricians because they really see them as experts. They went to school for this, so I trust that they have the most up-to-date knowledge on children's development. However, there are constraints, right? And sometimes parents felt that they didn't get everything that they needed from the pediatrician. And so one recommendation that comes out of this study would be to expand the types of information that can be offered during well-child visits. There are time constraints. The pediatrician cannot spend that much time with parents. And also, you can't necessarily just show up in your pediatrician's office every time you have a question. So there's an issue about access.
What are some of the ways that pediatricians can get around this?
Absolutely. I think pediatricians play a critical role in terms of advising parents where to go for additional information. They can advise them on which websites to look for information if they have a question in the middle of the night that is not an emergency. They can also refer them to parenting programs. They can refer them to other experts in different areas that parents might have questions about. But also, ideally, the pediatric office can be expanded to offer those services in-house while parents go for their well-child visits. Many parents appreciate it when pediatricians' offices, for example, had a lactation consultant in-house. And they wish that they could get more information from the pediatrician's office about children's socio-emotional development. So expanding the range of services that are offered in pediatric care would be an ideal setting for increasing parental knowledge about children's development.
Did you and your colleagues find that these questions from parents were pretty consistent across different socioeconomic groups?
In our literature review, what we found is that there isn't a lot of information about that question. And it's one of the things that we wanted to try to answer through our focus groups. In our focus groups, we included both mothers and fathers and parents from different socioeconomic statuses and also from different racial ethnic groups. And what was surprising is that parents across the board, rich or poor, Black, Hispanic, African American, they all worried about the same things and they all use the same kinds of sources of information. They all express a desire to continue to learn, and they felt that they didn't always have the information they needed. The most striking differences, interestingly, were between mothers and fathers, because mothers felt very overwhelmed and pressured by society in terms of how much they needed to do and know and do it all and do it well and be just the perfect mom. Whereas fathers felt that they were being left out and they're not included in programs. Information is not targeted towards fathers specifically, and they really want to be involved and want to be a part of raising a child.
Were there takeaways from this report, suggestions for parents, either places they could look for that information, websites or sources that came up as being really important or critical?
One of the most consistent findings that we found in the literature review is that the more parents know about parenting and children's development, the better equipped they are to support their children's development. So, and if you think about it, it makes sense, right? If you probably have seen a child, an 18-month-old who takes a toy and drops it on the floor and sees the mom pick it up and the child does it again and again and again. If you, as a parent, know that this is normal development because the child is just learning that their actions have consequences, and for them it's just fun, I do something and somebody else does something else, you are probably going to respond to this more calmly than a parent who doesn't know this information and who might think that the child is being disobedient or not following mother's instructions. So one recommendation is to seek out information, definitely, because the more you know, the better tools you'll have to support your children's development. The other recommendation would be to use the internet wisely. It is very convenient and it can provide a lot of information support. However, do ask professionals for guidance in terms of which sources on the internet to trust and which advice to follow.
Was there a trend from the focus groups, certain questions that kept coming up that it's in the back of every new parent's mind?
Broadly, socio-emotional development was probably the top theme that parents had questions about. And within that, parents really needed to learn about temper tantrums. How do I deal with temper tantrums? When are they going to learn how to self-regulate? I know that self-regulation is the thing, but what is it? What does it mean and how do I support it? So definitely dealing with and understanding temper tantrums was one of the most pressing questions that parents had in terms of socio-emotional development.
Were there others that you remember that stuck out in your mind?
Parents had a lot of questions about feedings, so they often mentioned, I get multiple messages about the importance of breastfeeding. However, how do I do it? What if it doesn't work? It's hard for me. I need support. And this is not only the case for breastfeeding, but in general, they felt that they received a lot of recommendations without support or help troubleshooting if things don't go according to plan. So breastfeeding was definitely another one. In feedings in general, when do I introduce solids? When do I introduce water? How much and how often, etc. Discipline also emerged as a big theme across all groups. Parents may differ in their approach to discipline, but they all agreed that they wanted to be better at providing age-appropriate guidance.
In terms of the question of discipline, which can be a very tricky subject, parents had a lot of questions.
Parents from all socioeconomic groups and racial ethnic groups wanted to become better disciplinarians. They wanted to find better ways that were age appropriate of disciplining their children, and they wanted to learn about how to discipline their children in less harsh ways.
You have these big three questions that parents are looking for answers to. From your research, where can parents go for these answers?
Well, I think we're not in the business or the position to have recommendations of where specifically to go. We do recommend that parents go to professionals. They have the most up-to-date, most trustworthy information that parents can get, and they can definitely refer them to different resources. So our recommendation to parents is to go to professionals who can point them in the right direction.
What are some of the implications from the findings?
For parents, the implications are that, again, you need to be very careful about how you use the internet. It can be a very useful resource, but do ask where to find the information on the internet. Also, that it is extremely important that you do seek out information and that you speak up. If your pediatrician is not answering your questions, do ask them. If your child care provider is not answering your questions, ask them. Or if they're providing recommendations that don't resonate to you and don't really apply in your circumstances, do ask for alternatives. And if they provide vague recommendations and you have no idea of how to implement them at home, do ask for examples, but tell me how to do this. And really not to feel alone in this process. Parents across the board felt that they had a lot of questions, that they sometimes didn't know what they were doing, and it is okay, and people struggle with knowing what to do and where to find information. The important thing is to be active about it and to seek out help from people that you trust in the professional environment who can point you to other sources of information.
So also in terms of going to pediatrician for guidance.
Well, when parents go to pediatricians or other professionals, what we recommend is that they help parents navigate the information that they're exposed to and identify what sources are trustworthy and which ones aren't. And when they're giving guidance to parents, guidance is best received if it's clear, concise, and science-based. If it is actionable, so if it tells parents how to use that information, and relatable, so if you give them examples of how to implement the information at home, it is more likely that they'll be able to use the information than if it's given in abstract terms. But also that parents receive support from practitioners in the process of implementing this knowledge, that if it doesn't work for whatever reason, they work with parents to find alternatives that are relevant or appropriate in their circumstances.
If you could give us a couple of details about how you and your colleagues went about looking at all of this information for both the literature review and some numbers on the focus groups.
We conducted a systematic literature review in which we reviewed over 250 articles in both peer-reviewed journals and also reports published by independent research organizations, government agencies, and doctoral dissertations or master's theses. And we searched for information about what parents know about parenting and children's development, what they want to know, how they use the information, and to the extent possible, whether there were any differences by socioeconomic status and race or ethnic group.
What period of time did you conduct the focus groups?
We conducted the focus groups over a period of about 6 months in 3 different locations in the United States, because we wanted to make sure that we got perspectives from parents from different locations, and we included parents from different socioeconomic statuses and racial ethnic groups as well. And importantly, we included mothers and fathers in our focus groups because we noticed from the literature review that fathers are usually absent from this literature, and we wanted to make sure that both moms and dads could provide their perspectives on what they want to know and need to know about parenting and children's development and how they go about finding information on those topics.
Roughly how many families were involved in the focus groups?
We had 13 focus groups for a total of 90 parents.
Was there an age range of child that you found where it was especially important for parents to make sure that they had the information they needed, or they were at least directed to a place to find the information they needed?
Yes, we really focused on first-time parents of children under the age of 3 was our target population, both in terms of the literature review and the focus groups. And the reason for that is because first-time parents are very open to information, to receiving information, and for that reason, they are the target population for many amazing programs that are out there to help parents know what to expect and how to parent, right? And in addition, we know from a lot of research that's been done that the first years in a child's life have very long-term consequences. Whatever they're exposed to has very low long-term consequences.
Why, in particular, this segment, first-time parents that have children under 3?
Well, we focused on this population because first-time parents are very open to information about parenting and children's development, and they also haven't formalized their parenting styles yet. So they are very receptive to what we can offer in terms of what science shows that works and doesn't work, and what might be good strategies to implement at home. In addition, the first few years in a child's life are very critical in terms of how children fare later on in life. So whatever they're exposed to positive or not so positive, has very long-term consequences. So it's a prime time to really try to support children's development and increase parental knowledge about children's development.
Area of expertise.
Mental health and Latino youth risk behaviors.
If you could tell me where you got your undergraduate degree, your master's, and any advanced degree.
I did my undergraduate degree in Puerto Rico at the University of Puerto Rico in psychology, and then I completed my graduate education at New York University in community and developmental psychology.
So you have a master's in community and developmental psychology?
A master's and PhD. It was a joint program.